Good morning, good morning, good morning, LinkedIn Live. How are we doing? If you're in the UK, how has your 4-day week been? I know for me, it's been amazing because I tell you what, if you joined my LinkedIn Live last week, you would have thought Cheryl's looking a bit tired. I'm not going to lie. I was definitely tired. I was in need of a 4-day week for sure because I was tired. Interestingly, if you're interested in 4-day week, I did do a LinkedIn Live about it. I can't remember when, some weeks ago. If you wanna go and see where all of my LinkedIn lives are, I'm starting to upload a lot of them on my YouTube channel. So if you go and find Cheryl Miller on YouTube, you want to sort of like binge out on some of the old content, you can do that rather than scrolling through my LinkedIn feed. But obviously that's the other way. But yeah, I was in need of a break, when I did my weekly LinkedIn Live last week. And I think you can see it in my tired eyes last Friday. Definitely feeling a lot better this week and looking forward to another long bank holiday. Looking forward to another 4-day week next week as well. Talking today about women at work. This is really a follow-up to a lot of the conversations I've been having with clients about International Women's Day. I'm actually doing quite a lot of Q&A sessions with women's networks in organisations. So, International Women's Day is like this one day in the year, right? Or this 1 month. So it's Women's History Month. But what happens after that? How do you keep the conversations going? What do women take away practically in terms of what they can do in terms of their own career? So coming at it from two perspectives, really. What is it that organizations can do to create the right sort of culture, the right sort of environment for women to thrive? But actually, and the conversations that I'm having more so for employees and women's networks in organizations, what is it that women can do for themselves, regardless of what the organization does? So those are some of the conversations I'm having on the back of International Women's Day. But today we're talking about the Great Breakup. So last week I was talking about paternity leave and the importance of paternity leave. So this is fathers taking parental leave. Today I'm talking about women, so I'm shifting the focus, talking about women. So today, and I've got a hard stop at 9 o'clock because I've got a meeting, 9 o'clock UK time. So today, what are we going to be talking about? Some of the common themes that have come out of some recent research. So the last bit of research that I'm going to be referring into is Deloitte, which came out just literally a couple of weeks ago, probably not even that. And so what are the common themes that are coming out of some of the research? So, burnout, we're going to talk about, which seems to be affecting women more so than men. Bias in the workplace and behaviours and how that shows up. Striking some sort of balance between work and life, house and work type of thing. And then how to create inclusive culture. So how do you create the sort of culture where, women don't want to break up with you as a company? So that's what we are going to be covering today. So first of all, then, I'm calling this gender part 2. So last week talked about paternity leave. This week I'm talking about women at work. Those of you that know my work already, you know that when I'm talking about, men and women at work, I'm talking about anybody that identifies as those genders, right? That's what I'm talking about. I am going to talk next week. Hopefully I'm not going to regret it, but I am going to talk next week about non-binary genders or genders beyond the kind of like cis, sort of identification. And actually, because, it's something that I'm helping quite a lot of clients with actually. So having people that join the organization that identify as non-binary or are transgender. So next week I'm going to be covering that in terms of some of the practicalities, what to do if a member of staff approaches you and says, look, I'm thinking of transitioning gender, or, I am transitioning gender, or I identify as non-binary, how do you deal with that? So that's going to be next week. That's going to be gender part 3. So today, what are we covering? So the research, I'm going to be referencing mainly 3 bits of research. The first one, or the oldest one, But perhaps actually the most extensive is the McKinsey Women in the Workplace survey that they do with Lean In. They've been doing it for a few years. That is from October 2022. We've also then got the PwC Women in Work Index. So this is kind of more looking at different countries and kind of what's happening in terms of things like the gender pay gap. And actually, they were focusing very much on the motherhood pay gap. That was from March 2023. So they released that around International Women's Day 2023. And then, as I said, finally, Deloitte Women at Work, I think that came out the 24th of April, I want to say, so very recent actually. So those are the pieces of research. We're going to look at some of the common themes and also some of the specific themes that have come out of the research, because they do use different lenses. And then there are sector differences. And I'll see how much of that we've got time to get into. But some of the common themes that came out of the research: flexibility, women wanting flexibility was at the top. Now, that kind of has a little bit of a double-edged sword to it, flexibility, because flexibility is great, and actually I think increasingly both men and women, and across all genders, want more flexibility. When you have just one gender wanting flexibility, so when you have just women wanting flexibility, what it can do actually is it can actually drive more of a gender pay gap. So it can drive the gap. It can also actually reduce opportunities for women. So as much as women are saying that they want flexibility, and it comes across loud and clear from all of the reports, there is a risk around it, and that's something that we'll get into. There are sector differences, and that doesn't come out so strongly in all of the reports. It comes out in one of the reports. So still, technical and engineering. So I guess those kind of like STEM, sort of sectors are struggling more than others. And something that doesn't come out of any of the reports, but it's something that I talked about last week, is this concept of greedy work. Not that the individuals are greedy, the work is greedy, right? The type of work is greedy. And this is, it's typically the city. When I say the city, like, sort of financial services and the associated sectors that support the city, so law, accountancy, those sorts of sectors. Those types of what's called, greedy work, because they tend to demand a lot of hours. Basically, they want their pound of flesh, is a way of describing it. It's kind of, that's a very sort of maybe an Anglophile type of way of putting it, but they want people to work weekends, work on their holidays, always be on, all of that sort of thing. And so in those kind of sectors and those sorts of cultures, women tend to fare less well. And so, the headlines, and why it's called the Great Breakup, more than 1 in 10 senior women are leaving companies. It's not that they're leaving work per se. I think some are, but they're leaving companies. So, sometimes when it comes to breakups, you sometimes hear the saying, it's not me, it's you. Actually, women are saying, in fact, no, the other way around. Often people say it's not you, it's me, when they're breaking it, right? But women are saying it's not me, it's you, as in they're saying it's you, the company, and this is why I'm breaking up. So yeah, women are definitely leaving. Some of the common themes that we're going to get into: flexibility, microaggression, so bias and how that shows up in the workplace, stress and burnout. We're going to get into all of that this morning. So let's start with burnout, because why are people burning out? So something like 40+% of women leaders feel burned out. It does differ depending on which of the studies you're looking at, but certainly McKinsey are reporting some 40+% of women leaders feeling burned out versus 31% of men leaders. Interestingly, in the report that Deloitte have just released, they are reporting a slight reduction in the burnout. So they're saying that it's reduced from being roughly 40% this time last year to 30% of women. So they're saying it's getting better. PwC in their report around, the mother, the impact of the workplace on mothers at the moment, said stress is definitely a big factor, and that, you've got women who are mothers who tend to be more stressed, but also the employees that are in the work that are kind of, having to sort of, pick up where perhaps, the mothers aren't getting that flexibility that they need, that they are also stressed as well. So it's on both ends. It's not just the mothers, it's people in the teams with mothers as well that are feeling stressed. So basically, I think in summary, and you can see on the slide there, women are kind of spreading themselves quite thin, and that is what is creating burnout. So putting others first and the well-being of others, as women, we are socialized to be nurturers and to be caring. And what this then often leads to is women put themselves, second to others, or sometimes even put themselves last, right? And so, taking on other people's, sometimes workload even, but also, other people's emotional well-being, that puts a strain on women and that creates additional stress. And then the second shift, I don't know how many people are familiar with that, but the second shift, it's 2023 and we're still talking about the fact that women are still doing the lion's share of the housework. I'm sorry, it's 2023, but women are still doing the lion's share. And I'm just trying to reach for some of the stats that I've got here, but more than 50% of women at every level of the organization. So in the McKinsey study, at entry level, it's 58% of women that are responsible for the majority of the housework and or childcare. And even for the senior women, it's 52%. And for the senior women, so basically as people get more senior, for men, they do less and less share of the housework and childcare. But for women, it kind of still stays above 50%. So that's a massive issue. So, for senior managers and up, 52% of the women are still doing the majority of the housework and or childcare, and only 13% of the men. So if you think about that in your organization, that is, that's contributing to a lot of the burnout and the stress. Women are literally doing this second shift when they get home. Okay, so that is a biggie, and that was reported in all of the surveys. I think in Women in Work 2023. So this is the PwC survey. So the average number of hours per week spent on unpaid childcare by gender. So women are spending, over 30 hours a week on, unpaid childcare, as in, looking after your own children. And the men, 20 something hours. I would say, I think it is changing. I think actually the pandemic has changed things slightly. And I think they are doing more. Deloitte's, sort of said similar, almost 50% of the women doing the majority of the housework. So this is a major issue. And as I put in a post this week, so my advice to women, stop criticizing other women who can afford to have help with childcare and or household tasks, because if you can afford to outsource it, you just can't do everything. And gender norms and the roles and all of that sort of thing aren't going to change overnight. If you can have that conversation at home with your partner, especially if you're in a hetero sort of relationship, because this is going to be more of an issue for you, that is one of the most important conversations you can have in your career. If you are attached to somebody, the divvying up of the housework, right? I'm just putting it out there. I've been there myself, right? I have been a working mom. I still have a daughter, but she's way past that age. But it's very important to have that conversation. It is very important to get as much help as you can. The other thing, so in terms of why women are feeling burned out and the additional type of work that women take on, women tend to get involved in the diversity, equity, and inclusion work in the organisation. So often this is being driven by women, probably because they are feeling, they're feeling the brunt of it. And they're feeling that they're in a workplace, maybe that it is, kind of biased, or they can see the injustices for other people and they feel it more. And so they tend to get involved in this work. So again, that's just work that they're doing on top of their day job, right? So that all leads to burnout. And then additional projects, as women, we kind of, we're socialized to not be great at saying no. We're socialized to want to please people, and we're socialized to want to be liked. All of that leads to volunteering for extra projects, taking on extra work because we feel that if we work hard and we get our heads down, we're going to get noticed and we're going to get all these opportunities, etc. All of that basically leads to burnout. It just leads to us taking on a lot more than we can handle. One of the other top issues that came out in all of these surveys actually was bias and behaviours, so non-inclusive behaviours. One of the things I often talk about, and I was going to call it, I was going to call these banter and behaviours, banter, bias, and behaviours. Banter, I'm conscious, is probably quite a sort of like UK term. So banter is that word for kind of almost like playful teasing, and I do it in quotes because often it's only playful for the people that are actually doing the teasing, and often the person that's on the receiving end gets actually quite tired of this banter. In surveys, this is something I think I've shared before. 1 in 5 women have reported loss of confidence due to, repetitive banter and teasing, and also 1 in 10 men as well. So this isn't just a problem for women, sort of all genders, and and even more so when you get into LGBTQ plus identities. So bias in behaviours, microaggressions, and how those show up. So gender norms, so things like I did a Q&A session recently for a group of women at an organisation, got some interesting questions, but the top question that was voted was, how do I call out inappropriate behaviours and bias? So it's things like always being asked to organise things and take meeting notes, and I mean the sorts of things. It's 2023. I still can't believe that we're talking about things like this in terms of women always being asked to take the notes, organize lunches for meetings. Or, I mean, I've just talked about the fact that women are doing a second shift at home. I think still in some workplaces, unfortunately, women are still being expected almost to act like the mothers and the help in the office. I mean, it's 2023, people. If this is happening in your workplace, call it out. Please call it out. It's really not, and I think say that to be say it's people, it's 2023. Yes, so some of those gender norms and how they're showing up in the workplace is leading to bias. And it's not just gender norms in terms of what we expect women to do, it's how we expect women to behave. So in some of the work that I do, I talk very much about there are behaviors and leadership traits like, being ambitious, being confident, being intelligent, all of these sorts of things, being direct, being assertive, which unfortunately, when those behaviors are displayed in men, they tend to be sort of like valued, and there's no penalty for men. Unfortunately, particularly in some organizations and some cultures, when women display those same behaviors that actually are associated with leadership, it tends to be a penalty. So women are kind of like walking this crazy tightrope, right? Of you need to display certain behaviors to be seen as someone that has gravitas and all of these things, right? But if you display them, all of a sudden you're unlikable. You're called a ball buster. All of these sorts of things. And women, I'm talking to you as well, right? So if you're looking at other women in the organization and you're saying, "Gosh, she's worse than the men," she's a ball buster, she's this, that, and the other. Don't do it, because all you're doing actually is you're internalizing those same gender norms that actually will hold you back also in terms of stepping into your power to be the sort of person that you need to be in the workplace, right? So gender norms and how they show up is really problematic, and how those behaviors show up. Overlooked. So this is a really common one. Women feeling that they're overlooked. Women feeling that they have their credibility questioned, and their judgment questioned a lot, and particularly for women of color. So women from an Asian background, women who identify as Black, women who are from an African American or Caribbean background. This is a much bigger issue as well. So, having your judgment questioned in meetings, in all sorts of forums, is not unusual. I've experienced this, particularly, you go on holiday You go on a holiday from a project or a piece of work, you come back and all of a sudden everyone's kind of like, had taken pot shots at your work while you've been away. I've dealt with this a number of times. So generally feeling undervalued is very, very common for women. And all of these things are some of the reasons that women are like, I'm leaving this company, this company is not for me. In terms of the final thing on the bottom of the slide there, women are interrupted and challenged more than men, something like almost a third more. So in Anglophile countries, if, say, for example, there is a 2-3 minute conversation, typically men might be interrupted once or twice in that conversation. Women typically are being interrupted 2 to 3 times. So women are interrupted more. And we see this in meetings. Think about the board meetings that you're in. Think about maybe the project meetings and things like that. Women get interrupted more. And often when women are interrupted, they are interrupted to be challenged, as in to be questioned, to be, I don't think that's correct, what you've just said there. As opposed to, sometimes when men are interrupted, it's to support or for a point of clarification. So this is how some of the behaviours show up. And actually, those behaviours around how women interrupted, I kind of have a hypothesis that this is part of what dents women's confidence as they go through the workplace. So is it any wonder that senior women often report having these crises of confidence? If you're in a workplace where you're constantly having your judgment questioned, you're constantly being over talked and being undermined, is it any wonder that senior women don't feel as confident about their ability to aspire and get ahead in the organization? So something definitely for organizations to be aware of. So getting on to the flexibility question. So lots of women saying we want more flexibility. Think about what we've just talked about previously in terms of burnout, the second shift, taking on the majority of the housework and the childcare. It's no wonder that women are saying they want more flexibility. However, and this is my caution, if women get flexibility and if women are doing most of their working from home and, doing term time working and all of those sorts of things, and men do not, and men continue to kind of like lean in, really hard to kind of that greedy work and are sort of constantly on, you're just going to increase the disparities. So you've got to be really, really careful here. So, definitely 61% of women want to work mainly remotely versus 50% of men. Men are like, I like coming into the office, it's fine for me. And part of that is they're not doing the bulk of the housework and the childcare, right? So they're not bothered about being in the office. They actually prefer to be in the office. So I would just really caution, HR professionals out there and organizations, I would really caution all of a sudden, granting lots of flexible working requests to women and, ending up in a situation where it looks like, women are kind of like, the ones kind of like shirking, working from home, not coming in, sort of coming in late, going early, all of that sort of stuff. You've got to be really careful in terms of how this is implemented, which is why one of my how-to pieces of advice is, look at things like equal parental leave. I cannot stress this enough. You have got to create working environments where it's okay for men to step into different types of roles. And you've got to create the sorts of cultures where senior leaders model that behavior. Senior leaders take extended parental leave. Senior leaders do job shares, right? You've got to make it the norm that senior leaders, step into different types of roles. Also do some root cause analysis. Obviously, the research that I've taken you through, this is thousands of women across different countries and types of companies and sectors. So it's pretty robust, but you might have unique things that are going on in your organization. So, mine the data that you already have. I'm not saying you need to go out and, do another round of surveys, but maybe do some focus groups, with the surveys that you've already got. Delve into the data by gender and see whether you can see any patterns. When it comes to performance management, this one's really key. I had an interesting conversation last week with somebody about performance issues when it comes to women. When it comes to performance management, one of the things is that women are often being judged based on personality traits, likability. What do people think of that person as a character? What are their characteristics? We need to move away from that. Specifically for women, you need to focus on what are they delivering. So make sure that your performance management techniques are very objective. Make sure that they're transparent, that you're having calibration meetings that are out in the open. People are openly talking about evidence, what good looks like. Just make sure that it's not based on who likes who and who shouts the loudest. And then everyday inclusion, be careful of those behaviours. Think about how to support women in meetings. So some of that is, amplifying the voices of women. If you are chairing meetings and you see this sort of behaviour, one of the things that I always say is hand the microphone back to the woman. You don't have to make a kind of big awkward deal about it. You can do if you know the individuals well, and you can say, "Oh, I think such and such was speaking there," but you can just hand the mic back and say, after that person's finished, you can say, "Cheryl, I think you were trying to say something. Do you want to just come in and finish that point?" So that's it. Whistle stop tour, because I've got a meeting in 1 minute. But I hope that was really useful. If you have got any other questions, send me a DM. If you want me to come into your organisation and talk a little bit more about this, if you want me to have a Q&A session specifically, with some of your women to deal with some of these challenges, more than happy to do that. And that is it. If you're in the UK, have a great long bank holiday, and I will speak to you soon. Take care. Go with grace. Bye.